We all know that the greatest trader in the history of the world is a little old man from Omaha, Nebraska, Warren Buffett. It's actually not true. The greatest trader in the world is Nancy Pelosi. Everybody knows that. Her record is actually better than that of Warren Buffett. Wait, hold on. It's not Nancy Pelosi, I forgot. It's her husband. She's not allowed to trade stocks, I don't think. It's her husband that does the most incredible trading in the history of trading. But is there something wrong here? The fact that congressmen and congresswomen are incredible traders. Are they using inside information? Today we're going to take a look at some of the top political traders in Washington, D.C. And we're going to ask the question, is this even legal? Let's get it. All right, guys, welcome to BitSquad Crypto. My name is Ben. If you like these videos, make sure to smash the like button. Today we're going to be talking about politicians and those of them that are the most active traders in Washington, D.C. Traders, politicians, is this even legal? We're going to take a look at that. But I do want to give a big shout out to D10. These are the people that provided us with this great whiteboard where you guys get these awesome videos. If you're interested in having one of these for yourself or your office, make sure to go down below in the description. We've got a link for you guys if you want to purchase one of these. This is what I call the Big Daddy right here. It's the Big Daddy. Look at this. It's awesome. All right, guys, so check this out. Breaking. I've just released the full trading report on politicians in 2022. Despite 2022 being the worst market since 2008, both Democrats and Republicans beat the markets. Many politicians individually beat the market, and many made unusual trades, resulting in huge gains. Here are the members of Congress that beat the SPY in 2022. You guys can see here Patrick Fallon, and of course, the red ones are Republicans, blue ones are Democrats. Debbie Schultz, obviously she was kind of in charge of Hillary's campaign back in the day. Also, she was in charge of the Democratic National Convention. I don't know what she does now, but I do know that she is over a 50% winner in the markets. And then it drops off pretty tremendously from 50% to 21%. Looking down here are some names that you might know. Marjorie Greene, that's my Congress lady here in Georgia. You also have John Boozman, who's in charge of the Boozman bill, 5% gains. Then you look here, Dan Crenshaw, we're gonna talk about him in a little bit, 3.6%. Tommy Tuberville, actually, former coach of the Auburn Tigers, he came in at 2.5%, which is better than he ever did with the Auburn Tigers, I believe. Go Dogs. Okay, so we're gonna break down a little bit further. We have here the average congressional stock returns in 2022. The SPY is negative 18.2%. Democrats not quite as good of traders as Republicans. The average Republican made 0.38% and the average Democrat lost 1.76%. Average congressional stock returns, you see the Democrats in the Senate who were in charge of everything, right? They have the best returns. I don't know, maybe Nancy Pelosi had something to do with that, not 100% sure. Average congressional stock returns in 2022. You guys can see this. This is from SPY match trades. You can see Republicans did better than them on that, so there you go. Republicans better at trading, worse at politics than the Democrats, from all appearances at least. So let's move on here. Let's check this out. Here are U.S. House of Representatives. This is the U.S. Senate. More than half of them sat on congressional committees that potentially gave them insight into the companies whose shares they reported buying or selling, an analysis by the New York Times has found. So very interesting here. Stock traders reported by nearly a fifth of Congress show possible conflicts. And before we really get into this, I think it's very important for me to say this. If you are in Congress and you are trading, it's going to be literally impossible to avoid any potential conflict. There's always going to be a conflict somewhere. Is it right? Is it wrong? That's for somebody else to decide. But if you look at it, you get so much information that there's always something or some committee that people can point to and say, oh, see, you made this trade based on that. Are they actually using inside information to make these trades? That's hard to say. Some of them will tell you, of course, that they have people that make these trades for them that actually don't even have any knowledge of what's going on in the committees. We do know that happened back in 2020 following the pandemic from a special committee that occurred during that time. But stock trades reported by nearly a fifth of Congress show possible conflicts. I would argue there's always going to be some type of conflict, whether or not it's a massive one or not. You know, that depends on how much money was made. Senator Tommy Tuberville, Republican of Alabama and a member of the Agricultural Committee, regularly reported buying and selling contracts tied to cattle prices starting last year, even as the panel, by Mr. Tuberville's own account, had been talking about the cattle markets. The timing of one trade by the wife of Representative Alan Lowenthal, Democrat of California, was especially striking. His disclosure statement said she had sold Boeing shares on March 5th, 2020, one day before a House committee on which he sits released damaging findings on the company's handling of its 737 MAX jet, which was involved in 2 fatal crashes. These lawmakers, all of whom defended the transactions as proper, are among 97 current senators or representatives who reported trades by themselves or immediate family members in stocks or other financial assets that intersected with the work of committees on which they serve, according to an extensive analysis from the New York Times. And, how do you feel if somebody owns crypto? Aren't we positive when we find out a politician owns Bitcoin or owns Ethereum? We love that, right? But yet here we're saying when they own stocks, maybe that's a problem. And I would just really ask you as we get a little further into this video, really think about that and really figure out where you stand on this. Because it is a little more complicated than this makes it seem. Because if we were to just get into these articles, like, what's the common sense here? They're politicians. They shouldn't do any trading. Well, we're going to get to why that may not make sense either. But the Times analysis demonstrates the scale of the issue. Over the 3-year period, more than 3,700 trades reported by lawmakers from both parties pose potential conflicts between their public responsibilities and private finances. And if you don't think that a lot of these politicians are sharing information that comes from these committee hearings, then you don't understand the way that humanity works and society works. Because, of course, there's being information that's being shared. So just because someone is on a committee or off a committee, that doesn't mean that a conflict of interest does not actually exist. It could exist even if you don't see it at first. So here it says, but many instances show how legislative work and investment decisions can overlap in ways that at a minimum can leave the appearance of a conflict and that sometimes form a troubling pattern, even if they are technically within the rules. Right, so what are the rules? This is the Stock Act. Now, this is going to be quite interesting when we dig into this. The Stop Trading on Congressional Knowledge Act. You can't make this stuff up, right? The Stock Act. The Stop Trading on Congressional Knowledge Act of 2012. Great. Whoever the acronym police are in Washington, y'all are the real heroes. The Stock Act became law in the wake of media reports critical of stock trading by members of Congress, notably during the 2008 financial crisis and during the debate on the Affordable Care Act in 2009. It also made clear members of Congress are subject to securities laws barring trading on material non-public information. Stock Act sought to address the perceived conflicts of interest in stock trading by members of Congress and other federal officials by requiring them to make public all securities transactions with a value above $1,000 within 30 days of receiving notice of the transaction and within 45 days of the date. It also mandated the posting of the filings on the internet. In most cases, the requirements also applied to trades by spouses and children. Look at Nancy Pelosi's husband doing a lot of very successful trading. While the Stock Act passed by overwhelming margins, now this is where things get super, super fascinating. Compliance with its reporting requirements has been spotty. The initial penalties for violating them modest and the compliance records shielded from public scrutiny. In 2021, news organizations identified 55 members of Congress who violated the law. No public information was available on whether they'd been addressed by the initial $200 fine. You almost pay that much for a seatbelt violation. But regardless, that's ridiculously small. Speeding ticket, you're going to pay less than that in a lot of cases. And of course, we don't know who paid it and who hasn't either. That's not publicly available. While the Stock Act affirmed insider trading on material, non-public information is a crime, no charges have been brought against a member of Congress under that provision. So we've got these people sitting around and they're like, what are we going to do? How are we going to stop this? I got an idea. Let's come up with an anti-insider trading law. What are we going to call it? Well, I want to call it the Stock Act. Well, what does stock stand for? And they go around the room 48 times. They finally come up with this. You can't make this acronym stuff up, guys. I don't mean to harp on it too much. But the point is, they're more concerned about the acronym, on what it stands for, than the actual application of the law. And I'll tell you, people are getting smarter. They see what's going on. They see the people that are doing things they should not be doing. They see people that come into Congress and are worth a couple $100,000, and they go out of Congress and they're worth millions. Now, are all of those ill-gotten gains? Probably not. Are most of them? I don't know. Are some of them? For sure. No question about that. The question is, how corrupt is the system? And we got Dan Crenshaw here, and I think this is a very fascinating article here. But I think this really goes to show a lot of the problem that a lot of these politicians have when they come into office, but I'm not really sure we've got a great way to really combat that. And we're going to talk about that. So Dan Crenshaw, here is his trading activity here. You guys can see he hasn't traded publicly since October 25th, which he bought Google. He bought Amazon that day. He bought Apple that day. And if we go back, we look at when was the bottom of the market, right? I think it was sometime in, I know for crypto it was November. I don't know when it was for the stock market, but it looks like a lot of these he was buying probably near the bottom. Then we have a sell down here for Boeing, which that goes back to January 20th. So he did not trade at all during 2022 between January and October. Very, very telling, interesting stuff. You can see his portfolio right here. You guys can check this out. This is on capitaltrades.com. But let's go back to what Dan Crenshaw says, because this is really fascinating stuff. Crenshaw, on Congress trading stocks, you have no way to better yourself. You have no way to better yourself. Well, Dan, you did have some ways, and you did better yourself in some other ways. Representative Dan Crenshaw was recently asked about members of Congress trading stocks, and his response was interesting. On the podcast, All American Savage Show, the host brought up the Signal's recent article about Crenshaw's trading netting the 5th highest return in all of Congress. I think it would be fine if you wanted to ban individual stock trading, as opposed to ETFs, indexes, said Crenshaw. I'm kind of neutral on it, so pretty interesting. He's saying that if you want to trade individual stocks, maybe there might be information that would help you determine from the inside what's going to pump, what's going to go down. So that might be illegal. But ETFs and indexes, I mean, that's fair game for everybody. And I would argue he may be right there. Maybe something to that. I'm going to also argue banning stock trading altogether for Congress is probably not going to work. And this is why, okay? If you want only millionaires and billionaires to run for Congress, then keep making sure we can't raise our pay. Just keep in mind that no one will run for Congress because you have no way to better yourself. Well, I myself might run for Congress one day. I have considered it, but here's the difference. I'm already a millionaire. I don't really need a lot of money. I wouldn't go into it thinking, hey, I really need to make the most money possible in politics. That doesn't really make sense. I don't care about that. What do I care about? Bettering the country. But if only people like me ran for Congress, then you're only going to have millionaires and billionaires running for Congress. And then you don't have people with middle class incomes running, and you don't want that. You want a wide variety of people running for these positions. But there are ways that you can better yourself outside of trading. But you also have to consider these politicians are nonstop surrounded by rich people on every side. They're getting donations from rich people. Other people in Congress are rich. Lobbyists have a lot of money. And it's almost like there's so much pressure coming to them from the outside that if they don't have any way to make more income, then they're going to be a lot more susceptible to taking bribes, to changing their stances on stuff based on lobbying money. And I think that presents a problem as well. So as a congressman, Crenshaw makes an annual salary of $174,000, well over twice the median household income in the United States. Members of the House also receive a $900,000 allowance to pay their staff and cover office and travel expenses. They can deduct $3,000 a year of living expenses. Who cares about that? After 5 years in Congress, members are eligible for a pension as well, although how much they receive after retirement depends on a number of factors. It's how long they served. So this work is really fascinating. On top of all the perks of being in Congress, Crenshaw has also written a best-selling book, Fortitude, American Resilience in the Era of Outrage. Sales got a boost from the National Republican Congressional Committee, which spent nearly $400,000 on a bulk order of the book. All told, Crenshaw's net worth is estimated to be between $1.5 and $3.4 million. So he's a millionaire. Not necessarily a multi-mega millionaire, but he is a millionaire. Was he a millionaire before he went into Congress? Doesn't look like it. Is he when he's going to leave? Yeah, it looks like it. And I think that's the thing that a lot of people have a problem with, which, by the way, if you want to check out my book, Catching Up to Crypto, you guys can get that. I have a link down below in the description. Let's see if we can outsell Fortitude, American Resilience in the Era of Outrage. Now, it's a good book. You should check it out. But the point I'm making is this. When it comes to stock trading, there's already an insider trading act, the Stock Act, that's supposed to prevent this stuff. It's not being applied. Do we want to prevent all senators and all Congress people from trading? Well, do we want them trading crypto? I mean, a lot of people would argue in the crypto world that that's a positive thing. It gives attention and awareness to the crypto world, and it shows it's got legitimacy with a lot of people that are politicians. However, we don't want insider trading. We don't want there to be an uneven playing field. So I would argue that really, I think the answer is something like what Crenshaw says here. He says, I think it would be fine if you want to ban individual stock trading as opposed to ETFs and indexes. There are things that make sense for people in Congress and the Senate to be able to trade. Where it doesn't make sense is when they're using things off of committees that only they know and they're profiting on that. Can we stop that 100%? Absolutely not. Can we stop it generally if we adjust some of the rules? Potentially. But just like we saw with the Stock Act over here, guys, it's got to be applied. If it's not applied, then what's the use of it? So I want to know what you guys think. Should Congress be able to trade? Is Nancy Pelosi the greatest trader of all time? Or do you believe she was using insider information? Drop those comments down below. That's all I got. Be blessed. Big boy out.